everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Untold Truth. This is the podcast where we literally punch racism in the face. Tonight, we have a special guest with us here, and it's a great honor to have Dr. Bayo Akomolafe with us. Dr. Bayo is rooted with the Yoruba people in more than human world, and he's the father to Alethea Anya and Kaya Jaden Abayomi, the grateful life partner to AJ, son and brother, a widely celebrated international speaker, post-humanist, thinker, poet, teacher, public intellectual, essayist, and author of two books, These Wilds Beyond Our Fences, Letters to My Daughter on Humanity's Search for Home, North Atlantic Books, and we will tell our own story, The Lions of Africa Speak. Bayo Akomolafe is the founder of the Emergence Network, a planet-wide initiative that seeks to convene communities in new ways in response to the critical civilizational challenges we face as a species. He is the host of the post-activist course festival event, We Will Dance with Mountains. He currently lectures at Pacifica Graduate Institute in California. He sits on the board of many organizations, including Science and Non-Duality in the US and Ancient Features in Australia. In July 2022, Dr. Akomolafe was appointed the inaugural Global Senior Fellow of University of California in Berkeley, Othering and Belonging Institute. He's also the inaugural Special Fellow of the Schumacher Center for New Economics, the inaugural Scholar in Residence for the Aspen Institute, the inaugural Special Fellow for the Council of an Uncertain Human Future, as well as a visiting scholar to the Clark University, Massachusetts, in the US for 2024. He has been a fellow for the New Institute in Hamburg, Germany, and visiting critic in residence for the Authors College of Art and Design in Los Angeles over 2023. He is the recipient of an honorary doctorate from the California Institute of Integral Studies and has been a commencement speaker in two universities' convocation events. He's also the recipient of the New Thought Leadership Award in 2021 and the Excellence in Ethnocultural Psychotherapy Award by the African Mental Health Summit in 2022. In a ceremony in July 2023, the city of Portland, Maine in USA awarded Dr. Akomolafe with the symbolic key to the city in recognition of his planet-wide work and achievements. Dr. Akomolafe is a member of the Club of Rome, a fellow for the Royal Society of Arts in the UK, and an ambassador for the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. And tonight he is our special guest on the Untold Truth, and we are so spoiled and blessed to have you, my brother. Welcome here. We look forward to spending the next hour with you, and thank you for so graciously coming onto our podcast.
My pleasure, brother. Good to be here. That was a long one. I may say so myself.
I like it though because you are the two brothers that I met you with in Ghana,
Yeah.
Brother Resma and Olin. They poked fun at you a little bit about being the younger one in the group and the two of them
Uh-huh.
being the
Mhm.
oldies. But
Jealous.
when we look at your achievements, you achieved like an old man. so, so you've got the type of things that we normally find old guys have accomplished, which just shows how amazing your journey has been coming up in the world. So in your own words, I've read all the amazing accolades that you've achieved, but in your own words, how would you describe yourself and your journey coming up?
Mm. These are probably the most difficult questions for me to answer because I never think of myself in the third person. I'm just I'm just bio, and I'm a nerd, and um I'm a becoming father. I often say that I'm a becoming father instead of a father, like I haven't arrived. It's my spiritual vocation. My deepest, most intimate work is learning how to be father to my children and partner to my wife. Um, and those are the things that define me and hold me, brother.
yeah,
It seems everything that I've been through in the world, my losing my father when I was very young in Lagos, Nigeria, and having to cook chicken on the streets, make chicken barbecue on the streets to help my family make ends meet, and pushing a wheelbarrow of chairs for parties, to across local governments so that my people could eat. Everything has brought me to this moment of tenderness and exploration and inquiry. I'm grateful for the privilege of being here and alive. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think I like. I also heard it when you were speaking about it in Ghana, but I like the fact that you emphasize so much your role as a father and as a partner to your wife. I think those are things that are critical in the world that we live in, where it has been pushed aside through this new world order where we're thinking and moving beyond the relationships in the household. That it's almost become fashionable to leave the wife and kids or to move out or do some funny things in this world. So I'm glad that and I share that with you. I have two boys and my wife, and that's also critical to my life in terms of who I am and what I put out in the world, because we are supposed to deliver children that's going to contribute positively in the world, right? That's the hope, at least. But I like that, and I think we're all born from struggle. But I think even though we all born from struggle and we fight for something in the world, when I look at your work and how you engage with certain topics,
Yeah.
and you said you started out introducing yourself as I'm a nerd. So is it only books that made you as smart as you are, or is there something special about Bayo that he holds that others don't necessarily have?
I don't think in terms of exclusivity or specialness. Um, I, I do feel that gifts are ecological performances, right? It's not that I have a gift or that you have a gift or that I'm special or that you're special. It's that certain times, conditions, material conditions, zeitgeists, moments, accidents, if you will, enlist us in particular ways. And we are given a sort of temporary usefulness, right? I resist the idea of being special in any way, right? I don't think of myself that way. And in the same way, I wouldn't think of myself as being smart because of books, or I do love to read, and other times I find it quite a bore to read. But my mind is constantly wandering. I need
Yeah,
to explore. I need to get lost again and again because reality can be asphyxiating for me. So
yeah,
I need to find other modes. Yeah.
yeah. I was laughing because I was listening to a keynote that you did, and I had to come out here tonight and ask that you do us a favor. You made a
Right.
joke, or you might have been serious. I don't know, but you said to the crowd, "I don't do small talk." so
Say that again, brother. I say that again. I don't do what?
you don't do small talk. So you
I
were
do
you were
small
you were
talk.
use small talk. Yeah, you were using
Okay.
some deep analysis, and then you made the comment, "I don't do small talk." But tonight, I hope that we can ask you to do a little bit of small talking to us.
Let's do that.
We like to, or my hope and my goal is always to break down the information to the smallest bits and pieces,
Yes, brother.
so that any person in society can gain from the insights that we share in our work. And so one of the areas that stood out in terms of what you are doing and what you are pursuing in your academic work, but also in your life work, that I'd like to understand a little bit more is
Yes.
you you are a post-humanist thinker.
Yes.
How do we sum that up and understand the critical parts of being that? Um, and how do we become co-contributors in the society that we are functioning in?
Hmm. Okay, so posthumanism is a field. It's not a single thing or discipline. It's a field of disciplines and inquiries, questions, suspicions. But what connects all these nodes together is the suspicion, the refusal, rather, to centralize humans as the heart of how what makes the universe work, right? And we do this all the time. And modernity teaches us to do that. When we think about value, we situate it within human sociality. When we think about intelligence, of course, tables are not intelligent. Of course, AI is only artificial. Its intelligence is derived from our natural intelligence, right? So we think about ourselves almost instinctively, I would say, at least in the formulations and the thoughts of philosophers like Baruch Spinoza, we think of ourselves as central to how the world works. We are the ones changing it. We are the ones thinking it. We are the ones dreaming, right? The rest of the world is dumb, mute, and silent. And we have to marshal the world in the ways of intelligence, if you will. But that's becoming increasingly difficult to sustain, brother. The idea that it's just us
Yeah,
and there's no one else in the room. Now we are, and there's so many examples. I get flawed by some of the examples, but now we have to consider how bacteria influences empires, right? How a singular virus shut down entire economies, right? We've been struggling
yeah,
with climate change and climate justice for what? Since the 1970s, when it became somewhat formalized in literature, right? Um,
yeah,
and and despite that, we never found the kind of agency to all go to our houses and not come out for a single year. But a single
yeah,
virus did that, right? So,
true.
just to wrap that point up, it's that we now have to think about not just this brain, we have to think about the gut brain. We have to think about ourselves as entangled within fields and intensities and energetic loads and thresholds and intergenerational traumatic yearnings that we are not acting alone in the world. We are part of
Yeah.
the fabric. Yeah,
Mm. So when I listen to that, um, I understand fully where this area of study is located in terms of understanding that post-humanism, it's beyond this idea of uh, the human centrality of everything that is birthed or developed throughout this world. So when I think about that, right, one of the core issues that we're dealing with in South Africa and that we um, are fighting, much like a lot of countries in this world, is racism. And in South Africa specifically, because of our history with apartheid, this is a constant for us. How in this post-humanist thinking do we approach the issue of racism
right,
and incorporate it into that thinking with a futuristic concept of how we change things in order to be in a better position in a couple of decades or at some point?
right. Okay, so the way that I want to enter into the space of this question and wrestle with it or dance with it or listen with it is to draw your attention to the ways we identify the racist, right? Um, some of the ways we identify the racist is in what the racist utters, how the racist behaves, um, uh, the thought patterns, the books around the racist. What else? What else? Give me stuff. Materials.
Yeah,
The apparatus of the racist is
yeah,
clear. I'm sure you and I have watched multiple. um, newsroom sessions where
Yeah.
journalists debate, is that guy racist? It's like, oh, he's racist.
Mm.
And some might even say, hey, he's not racist. In his heart, he's not racist. The conversation, the conversation is deeply humanist because it
Yeah.
kind of centralizes, it stops at what humans are doing, right? It doesn't go
Yeah.
beyond that. It only stops at humans and their actions. But what about the actions of the world on humans, brother? What about the ways that, you know, again here, for anyone listening to understand this, um, humanism starts from the individual that acts upon the world. Posthumanism says, how about we draw that threshold a little bit further back than we're used to and notice how the world acts upon the individual that acts upon the world. So this is not actually, I have to say this is not dismissing accountability. This is actually stretching accountability to see that we have and have always been, we are and have always been part of webs of agency. I read recently that um, whiteness and its spread around the world, it doesn't just owe its self to the technologies of transportation, to the slave ship, to gunpowder, to the weaponry, the weapons of war, right? Or trade. It also owes its vibrancy to the potato. The potato, the potato, right? The potato is central to the story of how whiteness spread, right? And I
Mm.
could take you through a trajectory of how that happened. Sugar is central and very, very powerful and potent in the web of how the transatlantic slave trade became itself, right?
Yeah.
And not just sugar, the microbial critters in our guts that feed on sugar that tell the brain, this is good, get some more. In fact, get a bunch of people, to get this stuff for you. Where I'm heading with this, brother, and this is the juicy
Yeah.
part. This is the juicy part for me. I've articulated something that I call transraciality. And what I mean by that is we are we seem to be distracted by the human figure when we're noticing how racialization happens. That a human is a very potent distracting force. The racist is not the human. The racist is an assemblage that enlists the human in how it comes to matter, right?
Mm.
So that's a reformulation of racialization and racism that does not start from the erring or sinful human subject and the ways we awkwardly try to position the sin of racism in the heart of the racist, that in your heart you're racist. There's no other conversation to be had if we think about the world that way. Then we're stuck.
Yeah.
It's a dead end, right? In your heart you're racist, you're evil. So what comes next? How to
Yeah.
purge you of your sin, right? So the racist is the furniture, is the architecture, is the intensity, is the texture, the colors, is bodies in interaction with each other. It's technology. It's all of these things, right? We're thinking about the world in relational, processual ways. In those assemblages, it's those assemblages that become racializing, not the atomic entity of the human within the assemblage. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, it does. It absolutely makes sense. And I get what you're saying. Um, and it still leaves me with the question though. It's everything as you've mentioned and explained. It's everything that fits into our where we come from and how we move beyond, and not just the internal process of how we point out certain behaviorism or what
Yeah,
is housed within the body of a person.
yeah,
um and as you said, if we only make it about what the heart is filled with or the body is filled with, and you don't look at all the other elements, how do we move beyond that? And so if I had to ask you, right, and this is not an easy one, or might be
please,
easy
let's
for
go.
you, I
Let's
might make it difficult, but if
No,
we
go.
break it down to the most basic instruction to the next generation of how do we undo the power of racism to oppress and continuously continue to oppress black
Yes,
people on the
yes,
continent, how
yes.
do we put in words what that process looks like for this future generation that has to take it from us?
I think that is a very, very interesting, beautiful, but difficult question to stay with. Difficult not because there isn't a beautiful response here that is lingering and dancing at the tip of my tongue, but because it'll take more time than we have, I think. But
Yeah,
let's go with it this way, brother. I think there is something about what my elders say that I've carried around the world when they say, in order to find your way, you must become lost, right? Um, they're inviting by lostness, they're inviting a strain away from the cartographies of capture. They're inviting us to consider how emancipation can emerge even in the midst of closure and incarceration. They're inviting us to notice how even our politics, of resistance can often feed into the very establishmentarian familiar status quo and structures that we're trying to upend. They're saying if you lean on a wall, and I'm saying this by
yeah,
day, I mean, I'm joining my voice to a firmament of insights that
yeah,
cannot be reduced to one individual. If you lean on a wall long enough, you take on the shape of that wall, right? That resistance can often fuel repetition, and that most of our work and passion has been devoted to critique, right? And we need critique, brother. We need
yeah,
calling out. We need to say, hey, this is not what you promised us, and we need to pay our bills, and this is not what the state is designed to do. But it comes to be, it's often the case that the way we respond to the crisis is the crisis, that we are stuck, so stuck and inebriated by the system that we become part of its furniture, part of its continuity. In many places across the world right now, um, organizations know that if you want continuity, if you want to thrive, then make your HD department, you know,
yeah,
make it rich and make it accessible. Give your employees room to protest. Something about that
yeah,
is very, very ironic. Like, we invite you to be protesting citizens, but protest within this box at between 5 and 6. So we'll give you permission to protest, right? Between 5 and 6, and
yeah,
then you're protesting, and then we do our work, and then it becomes a function of the state to make room for its opposition. When we become part of the very structure that we're resisting, then we need something different. We need a way out. We need to break out of the trance. And that's the question I feel you're asking.
mm,
That that it seems now all we can do only seems to be ensuring, it seems we're proliferating veterans and generating exhaustion more than we're shifting spaces. And I'll say
yeah,
maybe the ways that we think about change is already infected by the systems that we're trying to change. Maybe our visions, our visuality, the images that flood our minds when we think about justice and when we talk about arrival or when we even speculate about utopia. Those images are informed and subsidized by the world we're trying to leave behind, right? So that
yeah,
in a sense, our resistance is again part of the organization, the informing of the world we're so exhausted with. So I speak about post-activism, and my work is about sensitizing people to the edges of morality, to the edges of good versus bad, the edges of the room, the cracks in the architecture that keeps us contained. Because, brother, maybe I'll just take sidestep, dance to the right, and say this. I said this at a conference, was it 2 years ago? I was opening for Pharrell Williams, and he
mm,
had this huge conference. in Virginia, and it was about Black excellence, right? It was about people getting Google and billions of dollars to sponsor Black communities. You know, it was about NASA. There was a Black astronaut there speaking about how Black bodies can also go to space. It was a very, very powerful space, and I did not dismiss any of that. But then I was the keynote, I was the opening talk, and I got up on stage, and I remember myself saying that Black excellence can still be a form of white capture,
Mm,
right?
absolutely.
Right? That
Absolutely.
right? You get, I don't need to explain
Absolutely.
that, right?
Yeah.
That even Black excellence, the formation, the anticipation, how we think about privilege, who has it, what access is doing, who doesn't have it. Whiteness is not just white people. Black bodies participate in whiteness. Think about what's
Mm,
happened in Africa, brother. The catch-up imperative,
yeah.
right? It's like, oh, crap. If only our airports were as good as the ones in New York. Well, New York doesn't have it good. I mean, I mean that's a bad example. But
LAX.
if only we are like the West, or if only we're Nigerians do that all the time. I don't know if South
Yeah,
Africans do that all the time, but
absolutely.
we do that all the time, and it's the cosmological inadequacy that comes with being captured. We sense that we have to level up, we have to catch up with the others, right? Catch up imperative is secreted and dished out by whiteness,
Yeah.
right? We are sustaining and maintaining whiteness. The other ways we do that is in allocating blame to the isolated individual, because whiteness is the vocation of isolated individuals, right? It's the cosmology of isolated individuals. When we say, you are the racist, right? There's a sense in which we are ironically um, performing whiteness by doing that,
Yeah.
because we've reduced an entire ecology to a single image. And that's how whiteness wants us to see each other, the world, ecologies, through stabilized images, through
Mm,
stable identities. What blackness as a counter-hegemonic force is doing is that it is teasing apart the image and inviting flow. That's where lostness is. That's where social experimentation is. That is what I think we can tell our children, and what we can tell ourselves, what we can tell our ancestors, that we can start doing today.
mm. Wow. That was a good bit there, and I like that bit a lot. And something that I think we also, when we were in Ghana, you also highlighted something that you touched on now, which is
Right.
this catch-up
Yeah.
narrative and imperative that we use as Africans. And like you make an example of Nigeria, South Africa is exactly the same. And it's interesting when we were in Ghana, you said uh, we are yearning to win a Grammy, and we have nothing in our own country that
Yeah,
sets
you
us
heard
on the
someone said
standard.
that. Someone said
Yeah,
that stuff. I was
yeah,
like, oh, ooh, see that. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
so
yeah.
so those are some of the things, and I like that, because what it boils down to, and what I hear you saying, is that we are so invested and involved in the processes and the things that we are trying to overthrow,
Yeah.
that we are not even aware of how we're sustaining that process
Yes.
or that issue, and not actually working towards something that is in the future, for a better future for all,
Yes. You
which is
could say,
critical and
yes.
powerful for us to get and understand. But
Mm.
it touches also on the fact that we were in this world that we functioning through the political systems and the politics that we have been brought up with. We have learned certain traits, skills, characteristics from whiteness, as you have pointed out, that has kept us almost in the dark without us knowing that we're operating in the dark. We think we're seeing, but we're not seeing. And so, one of the key concepts that is critical to being blind followers is liberalism. And you have a lot to say about that. So, please teach on that.
Yeah. Well, well, liberalism or liberal humanism is all the things we've already started to talk about. It's the idea of the free individual who is untethered, not indebted to ecology, and who is, in many senses, separate from nature, right? Notice that the separation occasions the articulation of this other realm that we summarize as nature. So it's us against the world. It's Tupac. It's us versus nature. We
Yeah,
are not part of nature. We are divine. We're exclusive. There's something about us that doesn't fit in, and simultaneously burdens us humans with the vocation of being in service to the world. There's something patronizing about that. You might notice, but yes, we are engendered and burdened with this divine gift that is will and choice and agency and intelligence that the rest of the world does not have. And that idea of separation dances hand in hand with capitalist extractive capitalism,
yeah,
which needs to work with individuals, which needs to work with the consumer, right? It needs to
yeah,
isolate you from ecology so that it can create. It's just like what Descartes, did with the brain and the mind, basically, cleaving apart bodies and psyche, and then now struggling to reunite them again,
yeah,
and creating a need. It was almost entrepreneurial, his approach. In this same way, our neoliberal capitalisms function or orbit around the cosmology of the dissociated self, which needs
yeah,
goods and services. And
yeah,
that dances hand in hand with colonization, right? Racialization as an economic, social, material separation of bodies from planet, from ancestry, from others, right?
yeah,
And that dances hand in hand with neurotypicality, right? The ways that we pattern, not we, the way that the world is practiced and patterned. Like
yeah,
you're born into the world, you go to school, you earn a degree, you get a job, you settle down, you get married,
yeah,
you die. The pattern and rinse and
correct.
repeat.
Yeah,
Yes. So neurotypicality is not a type of person. It's not that you're neurotypical. Is that it's these are territorial patterns that we, like a maze, we become part of. We feed the patterns with our bodies. And this is the reason why I speak about autistic politics, but that's another conversation, brother. Yeah.
it's I'm gonna segue, right? But
Okay.
I'm gonna leave the segue in a massive leap with a massive step. And I think you'll get it in terms of what I'm alluding to. But if I think about what you just described right there, right, in this neoliberal thinking,
Hmm.
and this almost this morphing into this um, concept of how we perpetuate patterns. If we take that concept and we move it into what is currently happening in Palestine,
Yes.
is it fair to say that that is the type of patterns that have been developed by this world of oppressors and um, world dominant powers that is just following suit of what we have become used to in what they're doing now?
Indeed.
And how do we, and I've heard some of what you said about the genocide in Gaza and Palestine, or the
Yeah.
Palestinians, and how do we think about that also in a sense to stop that from becoming the normative standard? for
Yes.
how we allow these Western powers or the global north to dictate how our society is
Yes.
designed, formed, and um, almost changed in some sense.
Yes. Brother, that's a potent question. I was in the Turin, University of Turin, Italy, just a couple of days back, and I was speaking there with a group that had gathered in a classroom, and I was speaking about solidarity. Speaking about solidarity. Um, Someone asked me a question. It was very direct. He said, one state or two-state solution? Just what is like
Yeah,
one state or two-state solution? And I said to everyone that had gathered that my response is going to be scandalous. But I'm going to say it anyway because I dwell at the edges of scandal.
yeah,
Um, um, I don't care. And I said, my I don't care is not meant to convey that I'm not affected by this or that people aren't suffering because of this. No, my I don't care is a way of signaling that my creaturely finite attention and capabilities and interests are only in service or largely in service to a different kind of question. I want to hold space for the viability of the question you're asking, one state or two-state solution, right? But I want to also notice that I'm not as interested in that question as I'm interested in the other kinds of solidarities and the
mm,
and what I would call the minor gesture that doesn't come to the standardized height of public conversation, but it's still happening and it's how change happens. And I gave the example of Mandela giving a cup of tea to this gentleman who was the
mm.
leader. I forget his name. I forget his name. It's always
The
very
cleric.
difficult. Very, no,
Yeah,
no, not correct. This man went to Mandela's house and he was a general, I think, and Mandela offered him a cup of tea, and he said, how many cubes of sugar? Do you want milk? He put milk. Do you want sugar? He put sugar. And it was such a minor gesture, just a very,
yeah,
and yet the next few years, the next couple of years of South Africa turned on that moment. Now, you
yeah,
can anticipate a cup of tea in your manifesto, and yet it seems like everything turned on that moment. So I said to
yeah,
him that, what you just said, brother, about what I might think of as the epigenetics, the patterns that repeat
yeah,
themselves, right? Um, Before that, I had read about Palestinians being tagged. They were tagged with numbers. I think it was in the West Bank. They were tagged with numbers on their feet. The Israeli government doing this to bodies. And I asked myself, where have I seen this before? Of
yeah,
course, the Star of David, right? During the Holocaust, all
yeah,
those moments when bodies were archived for the gas chambers. And to see those patterns enlist the bodies, the ancestral and descendant bodies of these persecuted people, and then, follow this tyranny out on others. You can see we're
yeah,
dealing with more than human actors here. We're dealing with principalities and powers, right?
yeah,
These patterns repeat themselves. So I said I don't care, and I gave my reasons. And then a couple of Palestinian sisters there, PhDs they were doing, stood up and spoke and said, it is true that we don't look for the peace that is available by the US. We don't want that kind of peace any longer. Instead, we want a peace that is formulated in what we are doing, how we are asking
yeah,
questions. And so they said, we don't care too about one state or two-state solution. So it was an aha moment for everyone there that had been
yeah,
framed solidarity as something else. But let me stop there for now. Yeah.
yeah. No, I absolutely hear you, and I think it's we at a point in in the world that we have come to accept, in how we respond to these situations, where I think in terms of our future thinking, and we have to be future thinking,
Yeah,
especially as a global south and
yeah,
specifically Africa, we
yes,
have to start thinking about how do we function
yes,
outside of the global north, because we are so entrenched with that thinking, those
hmm,
patterns, that behaviorism. It's all set for us from that.
yes,
And so it comes to mind, one, we have the situation now in Palestine. We see how Israel, or the or how Israel have come to be this global power, or this international power that
hmm,
is using this war mongering as a form of silencing and obliterating a whole people. And in essence, if we think about our future, I don't think any of our African countries have the capacity to withstand that type of attack, right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
So how do we as a continent, how do we unite? How do we start having the conversations for Africa as a continent to unite, so that we become the type of people or unit that can in the future withstand these type of attacks, because it's not going to end in Palestine. You know, whiteness is not going to suddenly give up on the resources and the opportunities to extract
Mm,
overnight. This is going to continue for as long as it is allowed. So how do we then as a unit come together? Because politicians is not the way forward, have
mm,
never been, you know. So
mm.
people like us, the thinkers, the people that go beyond the obvious, what are we saying in terms of uniting Africa? How are we
Well,
um, attempting that?
well, brother, I don't know if you know this, but we met in Ghana for the first time. But um, I I actually had flown in from India and to visit my mother in Nigeria. The next logical step to take would have been to fly from Nigeria to Ghana.
Yeah,
I flew back to India so that I could fly to Ghana. Why? Because the flight from Nigeria to Ghana is prohibitively expensive to take. It's easier to fly from
yeah,
India to Ghana than it is to fly from Nigeria to Ghana. Um, and I think about the initial efforts. We have to give what's the saying? Give flowers, to those others, fathers, ancestors that had held space for this question you're asking.
yeah,
Kwame Nkrumah, W.E.B. Du Bois, um, uh, Julius Nyerere wanted to build a Black Federation, right? Martin Luther King, he wanted to build a
Thomas
Black Federation.
Sankara. Yeah,
Exactly. Sankara they wanted to do something outside of the commandeering vehicle of the nation state, the global
yeah,
nation state order. So much so that Ghana, I mean, Nkrumah was willing to collapse the entire constitution of Ghana so that it made space for the theoretical African Union, right? So
yeah,
when it's ready, let Ghana dissolve itself so that it can lend itself to this higher interest.
correct.
But but I think the question you're asking now is a question of containment. Those experiments are still largely on my mind in terms of how one responds to these times. And it's no coincidence that um, in these moments we're seeing coups coup d'etats across Africa.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's I don't think it's any coincidence. It's that it seems even the project of democracy, which depends largely on the formulation and the neatness of the citizen subject, the dissociated subject, right?
Yeah.
Even that project doesn't seem as gripping or as compelling. You know, in Nigeria, on the streets of Nigeria, we'll be like, where are the dividends of democracy? You know, I make bold to say right now that the person sitting in Aso Rock in Abuja is a tool, right?
Yeah.
Just a sham of a democratic election has put a billionaire and a thief in in the Nigerian citadel of power.
Yeah.
Right. So I think people are asking different questions. What if instead of imagining a utopia, which is what our fathers imagined and our mothers imagined, what if we delayed or postponed the product and we just entered into process? So I'm speaking about a post-democratic inquiry, fungal networks of unlearning together, right? Maybe learning together, unlearning together, sharing with one another outside of institutional confines might give us a sense of new worlds to taste, right? I think we're
Mm.
too enamored of utopia. Like
Yeah.
this is what a black world that leads the world into happiness will look like. I, I want to step back from product and enter into no resolution, but process and see what study together. I don't mean study in terms of university. I mean what
Yeah.
grandmothers do when they cook food for us. That's study,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Fugitive study. Maybe somewhere there in the midst of that, new worlds will percolate. In feedback loops, we will be able to sense new cartographies.
Mm. I like that. I think what you're alluding to in that conversation or in that statement is, if we think about it, um, and it probably you touched on some of it, but we can probably conclude that democracy is not working for Africa, right? We can conclude to some extent that democracy, in the form that it has been introduced and have been developed or have been shaved and shaped by African leaders, is not working for Africa.
Mm. What I'll say, brother, is that it's working, right? The reason why I'll say it's working, even though it seems in contradiction to what I just said a while ago, why I would it's not a matter, you know how people say, I think protesters say that the system isn't broken, it's working exactly how it was
The way
designed,
it was designed,
right?
yeah,
Now, I'm not going to say that a group of reptilian overlords designed democracy in a committee session so that Africans will be under. But I want to notice those patterns again. That what is it? What? How do we make sense of a world that prides itself on democratic liberation, a nation state like France, a citadel of freedom, still exacting taxes, colonial taxes from
yeah,
former French colonies, right? The architecture of freedom has never been premised on Black emancipation, right? Even freedom doesn't seem to look like it was intended for
yeah,
us, right? Just in the same
true,
way justice kneels on the necks of our brothers and sisters in the United States, it seems that freedom, democratic processes in the ways that it's gloriously vaunted in the global north, um,
yeah,
for it to survive, it needs the underbelly of extractivism. It needs the
yeah,
underbelly of the Niger Delta. It needs the underbelly of Congolese boys going into mines to fish out cobalt, right?
yeah,
So democracy still gives problematic. So this is my way of saying that democracy is working. It's working by using um, a part of the world as a dumping ground for discarded material.
yeah,
Maybe then this is again the time for us to embrace post-democratic inquiry. But by post-democratic, I don't mean after democracy. I mean that we even notice the edges, the tensions of democracy. That's a post, right? That we stay in those places where things are tense, and then we ask new questions and we embrace social experimentation, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's I think that's there's a lot to chew on in
Yeah.
terms of what that looked like.
Yes.
Because as a continent, I think we keep seeing just how much we are divided as a continent. So whatever colonialism had intended,
Yeah.
had regardless of the systems that have been put in place,
Hmm.
it is working beautifully to keep African brothers and sisters apart. Because while we are attempting to equal the playing field with the global north, when we align with our brothers and sisters, we are trying to divide our superiority above our people that look like us that's living next to us. So it's weird in that sense, but I guess that's what it was intended to do. And so now we are playing this game of trying to be the best colonizers within the African continent.
Hmm.
Crazy enough, but it speaks to what you're speaking about. We're so invested in this process, so invested in the patterns and concepts that have been imparted to us that we are not even aware that we are functioning as our oppressors have been doing
Hmm.
to us. So we have it's for none, you become the thing that you have been trying to fight for so long.
Indeed. Indeed.
And so we sitting at uh, this heightened point in our um, specifically this country. We're sitting at an election, right, in South Africa, where
Yeah.
in 2 months' time we're gonna have elections,
Indeed.
and we don't have a political party that is currently looking like they're gonna take the win, if you want to call it that. Now, you look at that, right? We have a governing structure where um, we we don't see one outright winner. So you have
Yeah.
all these multiple parties that's gonna
Yeah.
need each other in order to have a majority so that they can govern. But within that multi-party system, you find that it doesn't work. They don't end up doing anything. They don't sign budgets, and then they keep chopping and changing. If this smaller party don't do what this bigger party wants, then they delete this one. They bring that one in. So it's chaos, right? And we are now ascending towards that type of chaos.
Yes.
So that's how it looks in a lot of, like you say, we have the coup d'etats, we have that happening in a lot of the African countries. We have unstable political systems, and
Yes.
then you have in the US this absurd possibility that Trump might get a second term in that place. Where
Crazy.
are we in terms of humanity realizing that we have lost it completely? We,
We just lost it just a
we
while ago.
lost it as a people. We've lost it. I mean, there's no argument that we are the superior beings governing or turning or shifting the world in terms of its changes. We can't adopt that type of position because when we look at us, we're gone. We've lost it completely. Global warming, unsustainable um, extraction from our natural resources. How do we, in that setting, capture some form of hope for the future?
That's we took a wide berth. Okay, to arrive at it, and it was beautiful. Your arrival, you stuck a landing. Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Um, I think that politics has to be conceived differently. Um, other than the ways that we think about politics as showing up at the voting booth, right? So that's the majoritarian gesture. That is the way that we conceive of politics at the city level, right? But I think we need a different kind of politics, um, and this politics will not look like a humanist one. It will look like us gathering at the edges of our skin. It will look like us gathering, I have this parabolic vehicle, a parable to explain or to kind of sit with what this politics might look like. So imagine, if you will, that we all got on a spaceship, and everyone, you, me, Trump, we got on a spaceship, specifically three of us. We got on a spaceship and we flew across space-time through wormholes, and we arrived at a more sustainable planet, right? But we have no information about this planet. We don't know what it is. We don't know how the local life is. We land and we have our tanks and suits. And these suits give us data about the world outside of us, right? Um, and we lower the gates and the doors and we open it out. And we're right there. We're literally at the edge of the human. And we're about to take the first step into the alien, right? But we don't exactly know where we're going to find it. Like I said, we don't
Yeah.
know if the air is breathable. The suits are not working that well because, like you said, the technology isn't that advanced. And so we're at a loss of some kind. Now, imagine that this isn't a sci-fi narrative, that we are actually at the edges of the human, right? When I talk about the human, I speak about a territory, a radioactive territory that has given birth to, corporate, consumerist, um, corporatized nation states,
Yeah.
hyper-industrialized um, worlds, right? Skies painted with the plumes of industry. We live in this radioactive territory that is increasingly defined as the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene
Yeah.
is not just climate. The Anthropocene is politics. It's the way we meet each other online. It's the way we are losing our organ for nuance, if you will.
Mm.
Like, we don't know how to hold complexity any
Yep.
longer. If you're not for me,
Absolutely.
you're against me. So that's all part of, climate isn't just weather conditions. It's not just outside the window. It's how we meet each other. Some scientists did this longitudinal study and noticed how in periods of warming, intense heat, that the human brain gets smaller, right? So, right, the human brain gets smaller. So you might extrapolate that in these times of heat and heat domes, right, all connected to anthropogenic work, right? That even our politics is affected, even how we think about solutions affected. So this is an assemblage of considerations. So we're right there again at the tip of the human. I think right now, brother, politics has to go beyond what we do on the spaceship. It has to be how we take risks. I know I'm speaking highly metaphorically, but it helps. How we take risks to to meet the local life.
Yeah.
And what that looks like is yet to come. There isn't a single image that I have in mind to offer people listening right now to say, hey, this is how it'll look like. I don't have any standardized model. Standardized models are the easiest things to come up with. But experimentation isn't necessarily the call for standardized knowledge products. We're inviting people to be sensitized to what I call syncopation, that the places where we don't add up, the places of deep failure, brother, the places where um where we're carried away, like those bodies were carried through the doors of no return, the door of no return at that castle in Ghana, the places where we are monstrous, where we fail to show up as proper citizen subjects, is the stuff, the base material of a new kind of politics, in my opinion. I
Yeah.
feel it's in the sharing of that. It's in the way that bodies are organized to meet each other, even in the smallness of a storytelling session. That don't let's think spectacularly. I'm not thinking big. I'm not thinking small either. I'm thinking between. I'm thinking beyond scale. I'm thinking fungally. I'm thinking of the ways that we can infect each other. Like a pandemic isn't big or small. A pandemic, it defies scale. It's not big, small. It's between. It's how bodies are betweening each other.
Yeah.
So we need a politics that does that, brother. And how we organize that is a thing of poetry, is a thing of philosophy, is a thing of study, is a thing of departure, is a thing of prayer and spirituality. There's a lot involved here. Yes.
So what I hear is there's still space on this earth for all of us, regardless of who we are and where we come from and our deep rooted belief system. There's still space for us.
You know what I would say? You know what I would
Yeah.
say to that? I would say instead that there's still space in the human for the earth. No, right? It's not that there's still space on the earth for us. It's that there's still space. There's still space in the human for the earth. There's still space for the aliens. There's still space for the bewildering, surprising politics that might birth new kinds of realities. Let's not be um, overwhelmed by the present so that we lose sight of the fact that the present is not as totalizing as modernity thinks it is.
I cannot think on a better note to end tonight, my brother. That was absolutely brilliant. Um, you've heard it here on the Untold Truth. This is our first one for 2024. We couldn't have made a better choice by bringing my brother on board here. My brother, we appreciate you. We hope only for the best for you, and that we can definitely for the future build on this concepts and the position that you are trying to achieve in this world. We support you. We want to be part of that. Hopefully, we will have you in South Africa in 2025 to be part of the conference in South Africa. But we desperately need your teaching and your thinking, your post-humanist thinking, because I think we are limited in this world with what we have been taught by our colonial powers. And we need our African brothers and sisters who are connected to the Anthropocene, the world, the earth, the galaxy, the global nature of where we are, beyond the limits of what the mind can offer. And
Yes,
so, in that, we pray that you continue to have that type of power, um, and that it will be influential to our establishment of something in the future that is really worthwhile for the African child.
thank you, brother.
But we thank you. We appreciate you. All the best for you and your family. And for everybody else, we look forward to seeing you at the next one. You've heard it here first on the Untold Truth. Until next time, have a good one.